and learning from their mistakes, and also maximizing the opportunities, not just to learn from them, but to also be part of their network. Because what that does, it gives us, the impetus needed for growth. And this series of events have been held on the platform of Lantern, under Lane, under Samuel's wonderful leadership, and the team of Olamide, Hosanna, and the whole too numerous to mention. We do believe this would be, I feel as though I'm repeating it, but in essence, what we're trying to do is to provide a platform for ourselves, and also from those coming behind us, which is the most important part of it. We have learned what we have, and we have made our own mistakes. But the more we learn, the fewer mistakes we make. And we believe in a couple of years, the next batch of MBA, of Nigerians seeking MBA coming, we'll be able to get it right the first time. And that's the ultimate goal. Thank you so much to everyone who has made out time to be here. I would leave formal introduction of the panelists and the moderator, Taiwo, to be done by themselves. But our panelists, as we have spoken, Peter, Sam, and Samuel, and Taiwo will moderate the questions. And we do expect today to be a wonderful learning opportunity for each and every one of us. Taiwo, floor is yours.
Thanks, Yusuf, for the time you've given to us to spend and speak to everyone today. And I'd like to welcome our panelists, Samuel and Peter. Thanks for making our time to come today to speak with us. And can everyone hear me? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can all.
Good. All right. Yeah. And as we all know, today's session generally will be about recruiting for internships and full-time offers in investment banking, or in banking in general, or corporate finance, or anything related to doing transactions for other companies and making them sort of go through various stages of their business cycle. So that's for those interested. And today, we have a couple of questions we're going to ask our panelists, as well as opening the floor for everyone else to ask questions. And I think, that's how the session will go. But then, I would like to make a brief introduction about myself. Prior to coming to business school, I used to work as a quantitative analyst, analyzing algorithms and models for investment banks and hedge funds to invest on the financial market. And I did that for 4 years, then realized that I wanted to move more to the transaction side of things, because I used to be on the market side, and realized that the easiest or best way for me to do that would be to go use an MBA to make that transition. And then on my 4th year on my role, or third year, around last year, during the pandemic, I started, applying, called a number of people, called Samuel as well. And, I kind of knew that Darden Business School was the best place for me to be at that point to, achieve my goal. And then, applied to Darden, got in, and I've been here for the past 1 month now. And I'll leave the floor for Samuel and Peter to also, make that introduction. Maybe Peter should go first.
Sure thing. So, hi everyone, good to be here. My name is Peter. So before business school, I went to business school in Rice. I worked in different finance roles. I did FP&A in the office of the CFO at Access Bank. I then left over to do investment banking in Nigeria, so with a boutique firm called BGL. Then I was recruited to join a corporate finance team with a manager I worked with at Access Bank. So lined up nicely with when I was moving to the US. My wife was already here, so I came to the US in 2017, and then was already applying to business school. My wife was in Houston. Rice was a good program. Gone to the program, spent 2 years, And I will say this, upfront. So in my first year recruiting for my internship, I did recruit for banking. So I did the whole 9 yards. However, Samuel is in banking. And so when Samuel speaks, I think you should weigh more towards what he says, right? Because I'm probably the example of, what to do and not get an offer. Although, I did everything right. So again, it's also maybe a message so that when you get to that point and you do recruit for banking, it's very possible for you to do everything correctly and then still not get the offer, but everything pans out well. I'm married, I have a 3-year-old kid, and currently now I work with EY Parthenon. In the transactions practice, I do M&A consulting.
All right. I mean, thanks for giving me the platform again. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Samuel Adioye. I think we've met a couple of times on this same platform. But yeah, thanks for inviting me once again, guys. My name is Samuel Fusuhine. I'm from Ghana. Before coming to the US, I used to work as a financial advisory associate in a boutique IB firm in Ghana called Bora Capital Advisors. So basically, we were working on a lot of private transactions, M&A, a lot of private placements, like raising capital in a private way. But I think at a point I realized most of the projects that I was working on were very, small in terms of deal size. It was like, maximum like $15 million. And so I was like, I started entertaining the idea of, being in an environment where I can work on like bigger deals. Like I read in the Wall Street Journal. And so that was when I started thinking about an MBA, because there was no way I was going to transfer my skills from Ghana to the US. And so I did a lot of research. Darden came up, applied, got admission into Darden, and did 2 years there. So I interned with Barclays, and I actually started full time about 2 weeks ago. And but I haven't hit the desk yet. I hit the desk after Labor Day, which is September 6th. And so I'm really looking forward to it. At this point, I'm just going through training, just doing training stuff. So yeah, basically that's a bit about me.
Great. Thanks guys for giving us that brief introduction. I guess we might just, ask a bit of questions that, would help the audience know, the next move to make and why they should make those moves. I'd say my first question is, and you might have mentioned it, but then like maybe I want you guys to go into a bit more detail about the reason why you feel like, the time you applied to graduate school was the best time for you to actually move and make that, the transition you wish to make.
Yeah, I can start. So for me, I have been working on the MBA applications, for like a year before I actually got into it. So I used 2 years for my MBA application. The first year I wasn't so serious about it because one, I didn't really know much about the US MBA application process, and the GMAT score that I was getting, because I wasn't putting so much effort into it, I wasn't getting the kind of score that I want. And so in the second year, that was when I was actually serious, because I realized that the kind of progression that I was getting in my current firm, if I didn't take the action to move on to the next stage, it was going to be very difficult for me, in the coming 2 years, when, you start getting bigger responsibilities and it become even more difficult to leave your current role. And so I had gotten to the stage where I was kind of like, like a senior associate type of thing. But like I didn't have like serious responsibilities like that. And so I was like, yeah, this would be the perfect time for me to kind of transition into the next stage, because I don't want to turn, let's say, a VP in my current firm and then come back to the US and have to start all over again. And so after 4 years in the firm, I was like, oh, this is the right time for me. And that was when I started, doing the whole MBA application thing and taking it very seriously.
Yeah, thanks.
Right, so mine was very straightforward. I met my wife in Nigeria and she moved out here in 2012. I think sometime around when we started dating long distance, we made a decision that we were going to move to the US. And so we got married in 2016. And then, after the wedding in Lagos, Nigeria, I moved out to the US. I think for me, it didn't matter. Again, Samuel kind of alluded to this. So really in the US, a lot of your experience isn't transferable, or at least you don't get credit for it. So I'd earned my CFA charter while in Nigeria. I'd worked in different finance roles, so I had deep financial experience. But like I'll just samplely throw my resume to some companies and wouldn't get a response. But then sometime in March, after I did get my MBA admission, so the only thing I changed on my resume was to put MBA candidate on that, right? Which then showed that you're right. So some US school has accredited you. I'll send my resume to the same places and then I'll start getting responses, right? So again, like if you're changing locations, one of the best ways to get into like a good role in corporate America is to just go to business school.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. First name change, only like thing you change would, just the name of your school can attract a lot of employers to, just look through your resume and give you a call. Absolutely agree. And for me as well, I think it's the same thing. For me, it was more like the best time was now, given that there was a pandemic and a lot of like the industries were already at the trough of their cycle. So like when things started picking up in the economy, I felt like that was the best time to go for an MBA. And when there's, the business cycle is going up, it means there'll be more employment and more opportunities for everyone. So that's what I feel like, was the best time for me to actually go for graduate school. So another question was, from your previous roles, how do you think, the skills you gained were very transferable in helping you sort of get the roles you wanted?
I can go, and I'll be very quick. So again, while in Access Bank, I did M&A. Access merged with Intercontinental. So on the acquirer side, I kind of laid a work stream for the management reporting function. When I moved to BGL, was doing more acquisition finance, and then when I worked with the energy firm, it was a local firm that bought an asset from Shell. So again, integration there, doing some large project program management. And simply, it's exactly what I'm doing like right now, helping firms acquire other firms, merge other firms. So it's very briefly, directly transferable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of the same for me. Like I was doing, like I said earlier on, like I was doing M&As usually on the sell side. But it was smaller deals. And so coming here is basically the same, but like larger deals. So I'll be interning in the real estate group, and real estate is very unique in terms of how valuation and everything works. But like the basic underlying principle of the entire valuation process is basically the same as you would do with any other organization. So I find the skills from my old firm very transferable now. But I would like to say though that if you never did anything finance and you're still interested in investment banking, like it doesn't matter at all whether you did finance or not. Like you can still. I always used one of my classmates who was a librarian her entire life. Like she used to work at the library, and now she's going into banking. So it doesn't matter whether you did finance in your past life or not. What for me really matters is your willingness to learn, right? And for most people, like the moment they hear finance, they just shy away from it. But like if the bankers see that, or you're willing to put in the effort to learn about the business and about all the technical stuff, that is all they need. They don't need the background really. But yeah, to answer the question, my background really helped me because it made things very easy for me to understand.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, thank you for that. Also, I just want to kind of like create a picture because I think this was also very important for my own process, create a picture of what recruiting actually looks like on ground and how different it is back home compared to say, in the US. as an MBA student coming into the US, what kind of nuances did you realize that makes recruiting different? I don't want to use more difficult, but different and culturally, culturally different from what we would see in Nigeria or in Africa in general.
I would start with this. So I don't know if in Nigeria is you have the same term for it, but in Ghana we usually refer to something called whom you know, right? Before you can get a job, you need to know someone. And in Ghana, it's usually you need to know someone who knows someone at the top position so they can just use protocol to get you entrance, right?
Yeah.
I think in the US, whom you know works, but in a different light. So in the US, whom you know is basically who you've networked with over the past few months before your interview phase, right? Networking is a huge thing. In our part of the world, we just submit application and then we wait to hear from them, right? You never have to call anyone in the company. You never have to, do anything until you hear from the company that they are moving you to the next process. Here, before you even put in your application, you should have spoken to, in my case, I had spoken to like almost 15 people before I submitted my application, right? Because really, what makes them move the process forward for you is the bankers telling the recruiters or like the HR people that, hey, I talked to this guy. He seems like a good person. I talked to this guy. I believe he has the right attitude for the work. So, push him ahead of the process. That's how they do it. I always say this, like when I was doing my internship, I came across this file and it was like in a matrix form on all the people that they were talking to around that time. Wow. And for each person that any banker talked to, they will come and make like small comments in that box. And some of the comments were like, oh, this guy had a boring conversation. This guy had. So basically, like recruiting in the US is just networking with people, trying to get people to get to know you and trying to like find out more about the process from the bankers. And that's how they end up forwarding your name to move ahead of the process. So if you're doing banking, don't just put in the application and wait. Like make very proactive efforts to get to know people in the bank.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to add anything. Then Samuel, if I can ask you a question. So like, did you mean 15 people at one bank or 15 people across, number of banks?
So for me, like I kind of knew I wanted Barclays. So with the 15 people, I probably spoke to 8 people from Barclays alone. And then the remaining from the other banks. But even after submitting the application, I ended up like speaking to a whole lot of people after. But even before, which usually doesn't happen in our part of the world, like nobody submits application before, like nobody speaks to or networks before submitting application. But here is quite the opposite. Yeah, as you, I'm sure you're going to talk more about.
Yeah.
So Tyler, I'm not trying to, like take away your paneling, but yeah, just want to all right, so I'll step back. So I did, when I was looking for the internship for banking, I think I did maybe 40 chats, right? They're called coffee chats. Essentially, you'll, hang with a banker for like 25, 30 minutes. You both grab coffee and then you talk. It's an informal interview because they're evaluating you. So it's essentially, I think what they're trying to find out is, I'm going to be working 100 hours. Is this the kind of guy that I want to be working with at 3 a.m. or whatever odd time it is, whether you're in the office or you're sending out, someone sends you an email to get something done. So they're trying to evaluate if you are that person. The interviewing is pretty easy. They ask you a bunch of template questions that you would know the answers to, so it's not going to mean anything. I think, again, depending on, what business schools you go to, people in second year and your career office will give you the guidance on, all right, these are the things you should do. And and so if you're recruiting with a specific bank, so again, with some banks, some banks don't do the work authorization for international candidates. So maybe that will limit the number of banks you can apply to. But if you have a US work authorization, then you can probably apply to all the other banks. And so if you're applying to 10 banks, I think minimum, depending on how interested you are in a bank, but the minimum, at least talk to 3 or 4 people at one bank, if you're really interested in interviewing as well as, getting a job with that bank.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter and Samuel, for that insight. I think another question that I would say is quite important that maybe people prior to coming they should know is, what do you think they should start doing now that would help them, like acclimatize to the cultural nuances that they might face when networking with a banker or with bankers?
I mean, I know, Taiwo, you've probably gone through the process, but I remember during our international students orientation at that, and one of the assignments was, in the groups of 5, we should all go and start talking about something.
Yeah.
Right, like just start talking about something. And the whole point was to help us develop the habit of small talks. That is major in the US, right? If in the entire networking process is basically small. I mean, you end up finding a lot about the bank, about what the people do, and about how you can get into the bank. But for you to get someone to remember the conversation you had, because mind you, these bankers are having the same conversation with several other people, so you need to be memorable in a person's mind, and that is where the concept of small talks come in. So for me, usually, when I'm talking to people, I just pay attention to what they're saying, and if a conversation topic comes up, maybe the person is talking about a dog or the kid, like I use that as an opportunity to connect, with the person, right, on a different level, because they've heard so many. Oh, so how is your experience at the back? Like they've heard so many of those questions. Sometimes they just also want to have like a good conversation with people. And so in our part of the world, it's not like that. We don't do small talks. I mean, we might actually be the masters of small talk, but this will be the time to leverage on that thing that we've been doing in Africa, where we get to ask people a lot of questions about their interest and all those things. Just keep practicing those things. Like Peter said, the technical side is not difficult at all. In fact, there are books there for you to read, the 400 questions. If you master that particular book, you can answer all the questions that they ask you in the interview. So that shouldn't be your focal. I wouldn't say, spend your entire time learning that book. Spend your time rather learning how to network, how to connect with people beyond, like a superficial level, because that's what is going to get you to the door.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nothing to add from me.
Yeah. And another thing I would even, it's generally just networking and trying to find things that connect you together. For example, like if you have someone, an easy way you can do that, if you have someone that, let's say you have a coffee chat or you've signed up for a coffee chat with, one thing you can do is to maybe go on their LinkedIn and see things that you guys have in common. And when you start the conversation, you can sort of like just don't say like, oh, I saw you, no, it just looks like you're stalking them. Just steer your conversation in such a way that it then that question then comes up. And then you can then use that as a point of connection between the both of you. And then you can speak like a lot more about that. Aside that, anything, if they talk about anything outside of work, because these people, they work very long hours and they don't now want to jump on a call and now speak to you about work. So they just try as much as possible to be someone that helps them spend their time well and make them relax. So like just continuing from that, I also wanted to know, so in 4 minutes we'll start asking the audience for questions. So if you guys have questions, just let us know. by raising your hand or putting your questions in the chat. Yeah, so I also wanted to know, during the process in university, or in business school rather, how was the business school able to help the careers team? What sort of help did they provide? And the reason I'm asking this is to help us gauge what kind of level of effort we also need to put in from our end. So what level of support do you think, the university can provide? Do we come in with as a blank slate and then we'll learn everything for recruiting when we get to school? Or we should start putting in some level of efforts, either on the technical side or on the behavioral side, on the networking side? Like, how do we approach it coming into business school for recruiting in general?
I mean, the only thing I'll say is, I think at most of the business schools where banks recruit, it's a well-oiled machine, right? And all you need to do is plug yourself in. The part that you can start working on now is, just walk into a bar, pub, whatever, and then try and start a conversation with someone you don't know, because that's how all those conversations are going to be, and see how well you can hold those conversations. And practice, because that's what it's really going to be. Personally, I'm more introverted, and so after all of these networking sessions or doing a coffee chat, like, I'm very exhausted. Typically, I always lose my voice and need time to recharge. So if you can start building your stamina, doing that as frequently as you can, that's that. But with respect to what else you should be doing, again, at most schools, right, there's a career services going to tell you what the timeline is and all of those kinds of things. So I don't think that's anything that you should bother yourself about.
Yeah.
Samuel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. It's just that usually we tend to worry ourselves a bit too much about the technical stuff. Like, those, you would take care of them. Like, I promise you, you would have time to read all the technical materials. But like Peter said, right now, start developing the craft of starting conversations, because you're going to meet a lot of diverse people. Like, we are coming from Africa, we don't know a lot about branch culture, we don't know a lot about pets culture. But start finding out about those kind of things, like what is what is the thing that most Americans are interested in. What are the things that people who grew up in this kind of neighborhoods are interested in? Like, things that can help you strike conversations, because the networking is everything. It's everything. So start developing yourself like that. And yeah, I really like the idea of going to a bar and then just try striking a conversation with someone and see, notice how long you're able to hold the conversation, and try to improve on it. These days, I just strike conversations with people, and it's just because I want to see how good I can hold those conversations. So keep developing that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter and Samuel. So I'm just gonna go through the questions people in the audience have sent. So someone asked, is it just what kind of questions do we ask bankers during our networking calls? What kind of questions do we ask? Is it just telling them that you're open about opportunities? Like, how does the process go? How do you get information of first of all, how do you get the information of a banker? And how do you get the information of other bankers? And what sort of questions do you ask them during a networking call?
All right, I'll start with this. So, how to get information about a bank? I think Taiwo, you mentioned it. If the person is not a referral from someone you already spoke to, LinkedIn is a useful tool, right? It will help you get the basic info about the person, where the person used to work, the school the person attended, all those basic info. And just to reiterate, don't go into the conversation saying, "Oh, so this is what I found about you on LinkedIn." Don't do that. It's very stalkish. But they know that because when you research on them, LinkedIn will notify them. If you're private, maybe they will still notify that, or someone check your profile. So they know people are checking up on them. But in terms of the type of questions to ask, so for me, I usually like the natural conversation, right? But I always made sure I prepared some questions, like, and when you go on this, I think website, Measures and Inquisition or something like that, they have like sample questions, about 100 of them that you can ask. Most of them are very legit, but one thing that I would say is don't be too focused on those questions. Like if you ask a banker to tell me about like your day, or what kind of projects are you working on, which is one of the questions you find on Measures and Inquisition, and the person doesn't seem too interested in talking about his day because he's been talking about the same thing over and over, just be very flexible and change the conversation. You don't have to fixate on those questions, because mind you, what you want to do is to be memorable. It's for the person to go back to the office and say, oh, I talked to this guy and we had a great conversation. That's all you need. So don't be too fixated on, don't try to sound smart. Don't bombard them with what you read on the market. And so I read about Spark, which is what people were doing these days. And I remember we held like a meeting on the interns from this year. And most of the people who didn't make it to the next stage were people who asked questions about Spark because they wanted to sound smart. They wanted to sound like, oh, I've done investment banking research. Nobody cares about that. All they care about is good conversation. And so get the questions all right. And when you feel like, okay, you're stuck, you're not doing so well with the natural conversation, maybe you can ask the questions, and then maybe that would open up other conversation topics. But yeah, be very flexible in your conversation. Don't be too stringent.
I think the only thing I'll say is, so networking is kind of twofold, or there are two types. There's the part where you're having a one-on-one conversation with a banker, so coffee chat. There are the other ones where they take you to a happy hour, and so you're in small circles, half moons, right? So that's also part of the networking thing. So when you're having the formal conversations or the one-on-one conversations, again, person's trying to answer one question. Can I work with this person, right? So you'll do a 3 minutes, tell me about yourself, your background, and why you want to do banking. For the most part, some of the bankers will drive the conversations and ask you, but then depending on how good a conversationalist you are, right, as you're having the conversations, you're kind of like maybe asking them questions back as well. So again, I think back to my original, recommendation is just go to a bar and see how you can hold a conversation for 15, 20 minutes with someone you just met. That's really what you're trying to do with the bankers.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
I think what Peter said just reminded me of something that I always say whenever I'm talking to people. There is something they call the airport test, which I learned from an MD, which apparently when you're talking, whilst you're just blabbing, in their minds, it's like, if I'm stuck in an airport with this person for 2 hours, would I want to kill myself or continue the conversation? So when you're having conversation, just keep that in mind. Like listening to yourself, are you sounding boring because you're talking about a lot of technical things that is boring, or you are actually making a conversation with someone? That's very key.
Okay, thanks for that insight, Peter and Samuel. Another person asked if we can get the timeline for application for internships during the MBA program, or like in general, like at what period do companies come on ground to recruit for banking, or is there some sort of like pre-MBA recruiting that goes on, or do we have to wait till school starts?
So there are a couple of pre-MBA programs I know that I'm aware of. I know Bank of America has one, and I know JP Morgan also has one. Those are great, but if you're not ready to do some of those, then maybe they're not so great, because if that's your first impression that you make, then it might affect you, at least with that bank towards. On the timeline, again, I don't think I can see anything broadly, because it's going to be driven by your specific school, right? So I think I mentioned earlier, it's a well-oiled machine. Don't worry about timelines, all of those things. Once you're in the program, just plug into that machine.
Yeah, I think that's about it for the timeline.
Yeah, that's spot on. Your school just determines, different schools have, you know, the timelines that and slots that they have for different banks. And, you know, the careers team and the finance club will communicate like everything to everyone interested. Another person asked, you know, they asked Ben. Yeah, I don't know who Ben. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. That was a reply to someone. Okay, so someone asked, would you recommend focusing your efforts on one or two banks for an internship or applying for more banks? I probably think that has been answered. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it depends, right? So for me, I felt like I was having traction with a few banks, and so I wanted to focus my attention on those banks. But if you're going through the campus recruiting process, then maybe you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because sometimes the process can be a bit shocking, because you feel like you're having great conversation with one or two banks, and then they don't give you a favorable response. So if you spread your eggs in several baskets, that would, especially if you're going through the campus process.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, okay.
I think Ola raised his hand. I don't remember the last name. He probably had a question and maybe she didn't get to him, and I don't think it's been asked in the chat yet.
Okay, yeah, true, thanks.
Actually, I just wanted to give a bit of a contribution from my experience recruiting in the last COVID environment, because it was slightly different. You know, one, things happened way quicker because the funnel was much bigger, because applications were happening online and interviews were done via Zoom. So there was just a lot going on. So that's one. Two, what Peter has said is so spot on. You cannot apply. And so I found, so there was a process we used to get emails. There's a website, I think it's called Onta. You can target a team to make your process efficient, because there's a lot going on now. You can get their team emails, mail them. Sounds weird, because when I started the process, I was like, you mean I'll email a complete stranger out of the blue? For what? No, please, no. I'm not comfortable with that. I was on my own. No. See, we're targeting teams like directly, and then the thing is, then get why you're interested in that team. So if it's industrial, so another thing I did was I spoke to Nigerians that were in banking in different banks, in different teams, trying to understand, how did you get into this team? What were they looking for in your profile? So someone said, oh, I was a lawyer, but I was doing deals on infrastructure and all of that and power. So I got into powers and utilities.
Like, you're talking about my sister-in-law. I'm very strong. I'm sure you're talking about my sister-in-law when you say a lawyer doing deals.
She went to that in, what's her? That she was so fantastic. Like, she gave me really fantastic tips. So I now said, okay, I'm going to look into my background, find the pointers, and target these very, very specific teams, But honestly, all this while, but I had a really trying period because I fell sick. That's story for another day. And kind of that disrupted my recruiting, but I bounced back. But my point is, it's a bit different now. So target teams, have your pitch ready as why you want that specific team, why you want to work for that specific team. And that could give you a sense of a bit of a leg up now in the recruiting process, because it's wild. Like, it is wild because nobody has time to go to any campus again, right? So it's like open literally. And then when you go on LinkedIn, find a role. Like, so there was this thing so there was a company I was recruiting for that I couldn't finish my recruiting because of COVID, but I ended up I ended up impressing two of their senior managers in that company. So then I found a link to Citibank But although the role had closed, but so what I did was I took the link, sent it to them. I said, see guys, I'm interested in this role. Man, they opened their Rolodex and they just gave me names. Talk to this guy, talk to this guy, talk to this guy, talk to this guy. So there was this particular guy, his name kept coming up in Citibank. Then African American dude. Then I got his email. I just called a friend, Sam. His name is Samuel too, but he's also a Citibank, funny enough. So Samuel might know him. So Samuel just said, oh, don't worry, everybody's Citibank email ends like this. So I got his email. I messaged him that, see, I got your name from so people. Can we jump on a Zoom? Man, this guy replied me in like seconds because the names mattered. So it was like, yeah, Ola, no problem. Bam, by 6, we were talking. This guy was ready to almost do everything. So it was like, oh, it's close, but you have option 1, 2, 3, 4. You can still do banking. I was still trying to say, you know what? I'm not saying no. Really, like it's really like it was ready to go all out. And this is really the power of relationships. You understand? That was working. It was somebody else's how do you say that thing? Somebody else's goodwill that I was trading on. Now, because I didn't come like that, this guy was really, really ready to work out alternatives for me to get in, like literally after post MBA, which is almost impossible. But it was like there are ways that it can be done. So just stressing out that don't be shy, go after what you want. And then the last thing, have what looks like a genuine story. So my own story was history, which is a thing for me, but not everybody has that advantage. So I was able to bond with bankers using financial history. In short, that thing always gets them. And some of them give me their number. There's a guy that I was trying to get into this VC fellowship. The guy literally gave me his number. He has become my VC connector. So and the last thing, what Peter said, connecting with people is vital. Look for something about the bank, about a deal. Just say something that makes you look like you've dug beyond the surface, right? Not just saying, oh, I would like to work in Citibank, then crickets, and then it's open-ended. Just be in control of that conversation. Like if you're interested in M&A for some, you say, oh, just Google M&A deal. They will come up, read a little bit about it, and just go, oh, I read about this deal, and I was wondering why, and then just start, and then the person goes, okay, this one is actually interested in this job, and they light up, right? So just a sense of how the field is right now, but make sure you connect. And even if you don't get a job, I always do something. When I interview with people, I either get their personal emails, their work emails, or their number, and it works every time. Because even if I don't get that job, they become useful to getting something else somehow. You know, it's like I'm building my own book of relationships. That's what I call it. So thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Ola, for that insight. And it kind of even like, I was about even asking another question about like, for people that, want to apply for the MBA, they had previous experiences. And then in order to have like, how do you create stories that compel bankers that you're interested in banking from those your previous experiences? And secondly, this might be slightly advanced, but when do you start thinking on the kind of groups you feel you might have a slight advantage applying to and converting to an offer, or have a better advantage connecting with people within that group that will then help you get an offer?
So Ola said something, have something that looks like a genuine story, and I'll just edit it to say have a genuine story. And your story is your story, so own it, right? There's nothing you can do about your background. But I think more than anything, and many of us do this while we're applying for business school. So when you're writing the essays, you're doing very serious introspection that you've not done for 5, 10 years, right? And so take time and think why you even want to do it, right? Spend time, and it's not like you lock yourself in for 30 minutes and meditate, but it's like, okay, do I want to do banking? Why do I want to do banking? Yeah, so but why do I want to do banking? And so it's when you've had that hard conversation with yourself, your story comes out of it. And so you'll either know for sure if you want to do it or if you don't.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part of the question is pretty covered, like, doing an introspection into yourself and then coming up with a true story. I just want to tackle the second part of the question. Can you ask that again?
So the second part was like, at what point do you determine what group within the bank? Because I think at some point you might need to start making that decision.
Yeah.
What group within the bank you want to go to that will give you a better advantage than other people?
Yeah. I think with the group, usually people gravitate towards the group that kind of aligns with their their previous experience. So when I was in Ghana doing like the whole M&A stuff, like I was mostly doing it for real estate companies, right? And I think I did a couple of it too for like power utilities companies in Ghana. So when I came, I was kind of leveraging on that background, and I was talking to utilities more. And so I had like great traction with utilities. I almost went into that group. But then before that, I had a conversation with an MD in a real estate group, and he's a Ghanaian. And he was so nice, and he basically held my hand through the entire process. And I remember asking him, like, after our conversation, I was like, is there a spot in a real estate group? And then it was like, yeah, if you're interested in real estate, I can take you to it. So I didn't even have to like do the group recruiting with real estate. When it came, they just pushed me to real estate. And the reason why I did that was another thing you need in banking, because mind you, you also want to convert your offer, right? And so you need someone who can be your advocate in the room when they are discussing you, whether to proceed, like move you onto the next level or not. And for me, I realized having someone to hold my hand in the process, or having an advocate in the bank, is very, very important, right? Especially for when you go into banking and then you hear things about like people complaining that they cannot hear people's accent in meetings, and because of that, like there are like things that could go against you in the bank. And so I realized I needed someone who can be an advocate, who gets it, who knows where I'm coming from. And so once I met that MD, I was like, and then he was so passionate about the real estate projects, and I started learning more about their deals. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be in this one. But the long story short, basically you just leverage on your background, what you were doing in the past, and then that will kind of direct you into the group. But when you realize you have good traction with certain people in the group, because the people in the group matter a lot, the group culture, it matters a lot. Like I know people who did their internship in certain groups and they were like, oh man, I'm not coming back to banking, right? And it was all because of the good group culture. And then I loved my experience during the internship because I loved the people in the group, right? So that also matters. So just everything is flexible. Don't be too strict on, oh, I did projects in banking, so I'm going to financial institutions group. If it works out that way, fine. But then if you also find people whom you really like in a particular group, go for that one, because you're playing the long game.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It could either go both ways. Either, you find someone that, you have very good affiliation with and is ready to, go to the ends of the world for you, or you kind of like, use your background and align it just to play safe in each case. And I think another thing you need to think about, like Samuel said as well, is where would I be that would help me, convert my offer quickest, and also like what team do I feel like the culture really aligns to mine, and I won't drive myself crazy being within the team. So I think if no one has any other questions, I might just end it here and thank all our panelists, Peter and Samuel, for taking your time to speak with us and today, and share your insights on how we could get into banking, your processes, and how you guys were able to go through the process. But like, if any other person has questions, you could just send it to Lane, and then would hopefully get in contact with Peter and Samuel on how on answering those questions. But for now, like, thanks for coming. Thanks for taking time to speak with us, and thank you everyone for taking your time on a Sunday afternoon to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to make like one quick submission. So I think the African population, like the African people in banking, we have like a really strong representation now, right? And all the people are amazing. Like Damisola's name has been thrown around a lot. Like all of them are ready to go above and beyond for you. Like I know Damisola did that for one of my friends. Like he wasn't having good conversations with Credit Suisse. It was like, oh, let me connect you to someone in Bank of America. And the guy is going back to Bank of America right now. So if you're doing the search and maybe you're in a school and you don't find your school people in the bank, reach out to the African people. They will help you. So like just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to cut you off, Taro, but this is if you don't take anything out of this meeting, every African that is in a business school is your network. America works on networks. Use them. Like literally, it's like an understanding, as it were. Do you understand? Use them. That's the first thing I do. If I want to apply to any company today, I first go and look for Nigerians or Africans. Like I can name names. There's Samuel in Citibank, amazing dude. Like it was another dude that took his time to like really, really school me on this whole recruiting process. So absolutely do that to really level the playing field.
Okay. Like Tao said, we're at the end of the program, but I want to use this opportunity to say thank you to Samuel. There are so many Samuels. Well, thank you, Samuel of Barclays. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Taiwo. Thank you, Samuel of Lane. We have come to the end of this series at this particular point. But what I also want to throw out there is, even as we begin more intensive work, both with school and search, either for internships or full-time, just try and keep in touch. And still in line with that, we at Lantern, we are still trying to set up the modalities, hope it works, for those who would be attending the National Black in person in Chicago. We're trying to see if we can create accountability partners, because now is the best time to start booking your interviews. If you're going to be in person or if you're going to do it virtually, the interview slots are open now. This would be the best time to start booking them. And also we're trying to find out how we can ensure that we look out for one another, and would pass this message across as soon as we have finished the planning, in order to ensure that even if you're just new to the city, you would have brothers and sisters there waiting for you and hoping to guide you through the entire process. Thank you guys once again. I can't say thank you enough, because what we have just heard here, people actually do pay 2,500 a month for it in terms of recruiting services, but you've gotten it for free. Thank you so much again. I can't stop saying it. Peter has been amazing throughout. Samuel has been amazing throughout. Even the discussions and everything. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Taiwo, for being the best moderator we've ever had on this show. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much. Yeah, do have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks.
All right.
Bye. Yeah.
For having me.